They are negotiating. They'd like to do something, and we'll see if something is going to be done. They had a chance to do something a while ago, and it didn't work out, and we did Midnight Hammer. I don't think they want that happening again, but they would like to negotiate. We are negotiating with them right now.
For decades, tension between the United States and the Islamic Republic of Iran has existed beneath the surface of global politics, shaped by revolution, ideology, and strategic rivalry. The relationship collapsed after Iran's 1979 Islamic Revolution, when the US-backed Shah was removed and replaced by a religious government that rejected Western influence. Since then, distrust hardened into policy, sanctions replaced diplomacy, and military posturing became a language both sides understood. Over time, the Persian Gulf transformed into one of the most militarized maritime regions in the world, with aircraft carriers, missile systems, and intelligence networks silently monitoring one another. Yet, recent developments have pushed this long-standing rivalry into a sharper and more dangerous phase. Iranian officials have repeatedly warned that any direct strike by American forces would be interpreted as the beginning of a full-scale war. This statement is not symbolic. In military doctrine, declaring an all-out war signals the willingness to activate every available weapon system, regional alliance, and proxy network. For Tehran, such language suggests preparation for a conflict that could expand far beyond its borders. The immediate escalation traces back to public remarks made by former U.S. President Donald Trump. In a widely circulated recording, Trump claimed that a large naval deployment was moving toward Iranian waters. He described the movement as an armada, a term used historically to describe a concentrated formation of warships capable of launching sustained, multi-domain attacks. The U.S. Navy already holds unmatched global dominance, operating more aircraft carriers than any other nation combined. A carrier strike group alone can deliver air power, missile strikes, and electronic warfare operations simultaneously, often without requiring nearby land bases. The suggestion that such a formation was approaching Iran raised alarms not only in Tehran but across the Middle East. Trump's remarks carried another controversial claim. He asserted that hundreds of Iranian detainees, reportedly facing execution, were spared because of pressure from the United States. To understand the weight of this statement, it is necessary to examine the internal crisis unfolding inside Iran during that period. Iran had recently experienced widespread anti-government protests. Demonstrations erupted across multiple cities, fueled by economic hardship, political dissatisfaction, and frustration with social restrictions. In several regions, crowds gathered in numbers rarely seen in recent years. Protesters called for reforms, accountability, and in some cases, a complete transformation of governance. International observers, particularly in Washington and Tel Aviv, viewed these protests as a potential turning point. Analysts speculated that sustained demonstrations could destabilize the ruling establishment, possibly triggering internal collapse. However, the protests gradually lost momentum. Iranian security forces responded with forceful crackdowns, and demonstrations eventually dissolved. Reports from international media outlets and human rights organizations claimed that thousands of individuals were detained and several hundred faced severe punishment, including possible public executions. Iranian authorities have historically used public sentencing as a deterrent, sending a message that dissent carries heavy consequences. According to Trump's statement, approximately 800 detainees were allegedly hours away from execution before the Iranian government reversed its decision. He credited American threats of sweeping airstrikes as the primary reason behind that reversal. Tehran, however, never publicly confirmed that foreign pressure influenced its internal judicial actions. Iranian officials instead described the delays as procedural adjustments or timing-related considerations. The truth remains obscured by competing narratives, each serving political interests on opposite sides. The controversy quickly reached international diplomatic platforms. The United Nations Human Rights Council convened discussions addressing the alleged use of excessive force against Iranian civilians. Member states debated whether to formally condemn Tehran's actions. The voting outcome exposed deeper fractures within global alliances. India and China both declined to support the condemnation resolution. India's decision, in particular, attracted attention because New Delhi has historically balanced its relations carefully between Western democracies and regional partners. India's strategic hesitation reflects multiple layers of national interest. One of the most critical factors is the Chabahar Port project in southeastern Iran. Developed with Indian investment, the port is designed to provide India with direct access to Afghanistan and Central Asia, bypassing Pakistan's geographic barrier. For India, Chabahar represents more than a commercial investment. It is a geopolitical corridor linking trade, energy access, and regional influence. Any large-scale war involving Iran would likely disrupt or destroy this infrastructure, undermining years of diplomatic and financial commitment. Iranian leadership has repeatedly highlighted historical and civilizational connections with India. Iranian officials often reference cultural exchanges that existed long before the Islamic Republic was established, emphasizing shared trade routes and intellectual collaboration that date back thousands of years. Such references serve diplomatic purposes, reinforcing the argument that economic cooperation should continue despite global pressure. Meanwhile, Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei's representatives have issued warnings that any comprehensive war would trigger retaliation beyond Iran's borders. Iranian missile doctrine includes the capability to strike regional military bases hosting American forces. The country has also invested heavily in ballistic missile development, cruise missiles, and drone warfare. Over the past decade, Iran has expanded its ability to project power indirectly through allied militias and proxy organizations operating in Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen. These networks provide Tehran with layered response options, allowing it to engage adversaries without necessarily entering direct confrontation. Recognizing this risk, the United States has quietly reduced troop presence in certain installations located within range of Iranian missile systems. This repositioning reflects the growing vulnerability of fixed bases in modern warfare. Precision-guided missiles, coupled with drone reconnaissance, have reduced the safety once provided by geographic distance. Security analysts warn that the probability of military escalation remains significant. Strategic think tanks, including the Atlantic Council, have published scenario assessments exploring potential American actions. One possibility involves symbolic strikes designed to demonstrate military dominance without triggering full invasion. Such strikes might target locations within Tehran or other major urban centers, focusing on infrastructure connected to military command structures. Another potential strategy involves dismantling Iran's security and intelligence apparatus. Targeting headquarters used by military commanders or elite operational units could weaken Iran's coordination capabilities. Historical precedents show that eliminating high-ranking officers can temporarily disrupt command chains, though such actions often provoke retaliation rather than long-term deterrence. Cyber warfare represents another likely battlefield. Iran has both offensive and defensive cyber capabilities, and American cyber units possess advanced infiltration technologies capable of targeting financial systems, power grids, and communication networks. A successful cyber strike could paralyze infrastructure without physical destruction, but it also risks triggering reciprocal digital attacks across global financial markets. Economic warfare remains a particularly dangerous dimension. Iran's economy relies heavily on oil exports, shipping routes, and maritime trade facilities. Military strikes targeting oil storage terminals, export ports, or refining facilities could severely weaken government revenue. Similar strategies have been discussed in previous confrontations involving Iran and Israel, where speculation suggested that economic sabotage might achieve political goals without prolonged ground combat. Perhaps the most controversial scenario involves direct targeting of Iran's senior leadership. The United States previously demonstrated willingness to eliminate foreign military leaders when it conducted a drone strike that killed Iranian General Qasem Soleimani in 2020. Such operations carry enormous political consequences. Removing top leadership can destabilize command structures but can also unify domestic populations against external enemies, intensifying nationalist sentiment. Beyond military calculations, the broader consequences of a US-Iran war extend into global economics. The Persian Gulf remains one of the most critical energy corridors in the world. A large portion of global oil shipments passes through the Strait of Hormuz, a narrow maritime choke point located near Iranian territorial waters. Even temporary disruption could send energy prices sharply upward. Rising fuel costs would cascade into transportation, manufacturing, and food production sectors worldwide, accelerating inflation in both developed and developing economies. Regional stability would also face immediate strain. Countries across the Middle East maintain complex security partnerships with both Washington and Tehran. A direct conflict could force smaller nations to choose sides, potentially igniting secondary conflicts across already fragile states. India's position illustrates the complexity of this geopolitical equation. On one hand, India maintains strategic defense and technological cooperation with the United States. On the other, Iran remains a key energy supplier and regional transit partner. Balancing these relationships requires cautious diplomacy. Any prolonged war would likely disrupt energy imports, threaten maritime trade routes, and compromise infrastructure projects like Chabahar that aim to strengthen India's regional connectivity. Inside Iran, the situation remains equally uncertain. Economic sanctions have already placed severe pressure on daily life. Inflation, unemployment, and currency instability have strained household finances. A military confrontation could deepen these hardships, intensifying domestic unrest while simultaneously strengthening the government's justification for security crackdowns. International observers also note that modern conflicts rarely remain confined to direct battlefields. Proxy warfare, cyber-sabotage, and economic sanctions often expand conflicts across continents without formal declarations of war. Iran's alliances with non-state armed groups provide additional layers of strategic ambiguity, allowing responses to occur in multiple theaters simultaneously. The language used by Iranian leadership reflects awareness of this multidimensional warfare. Their warnings suggest that retaliation would not be limited to Iranian territory. Instead, they imply a networked response strategy designed to increase the cost of aggression for adversaries and their allies. Simultaneously, American political discourse continues to frame Iran as a destabilizing force across the Middle East, citing Tehran's support for militant organizations and its pursuit of advanced missile technology. These narratives reinforce domestic support for containment strategies, ensuring that diplomatic reconciliation remains difficult. Military analysts emphasize that escalation between technologically advanced states introduces unpredictable variables. Precision weapons, artificial intelligence-driven surveillance, and hypersonic missile development have compressed response times. Decisions that once took hours now occur within minutes, increasing the risk of accidental escalation triggered by misinterpretation or technical error. The presence of multiple external actors further complicates crisis management. Russia and China both maintain strategic partnerships with Iran, though their level of direct military involvement remains uncertain. Any extended conflict could reshape global power alignments, influencing trade routes, defense alliances, and diplomatic frameworks. As military assets continue to move across the region and diplomatic statements grow sharper, the situation reflects a familiar pattern in international relations. History repeatedly shows that prolonged rivalry, combined with political pressure and military readiness, creates an environment where small triggers can produce irreversible consequences. What makes the current moment particularly fragile is the convergence of internal unrest within Iran, strategic recalibration by the United States, and economic vulnerabilities affecting the global energy system. Each element alone represents a manageable risk. Together, they form a volatile intersection where political messaging, military deployment, and economic dependency collide. In geopolitical conflicts, the visible actions, warships, missile tests, and diplomatic speeches often represent only the surface of deeper strategic calculations. Beneath them lies a complex network of alliances, economic interests, and ideological commitments that shape decisions long before the first strike occurs.